Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. And also, the Search for the Ancient Bauble Kickstarter has launched, so make sure you go check that out. The Kickstarter campaign will last for 30 days, and after that, the playmat will no longer be available for purchase. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a really fun topic with some commanders with some truly nasty combos. Now, what exactly do I mean by a nasty combo, and how does that differ from a typical combo? Well, to me, these types of combos can be really off the wall, or they can be really unexpected, or really hard to stop. There might be certain commanders on this list that combo in a really unique way that you've never heard of, or thought of, or seen before, so yeah, they can surprise you. Regardless, in my opinion, these combos are particularly nasty, so I want to show them off. And some commanders even have multiple combos or multiple cards that they combo with that do similar things, so I'll be sure to bring up as many as I can. And I'm sure I'm going to forget some, so as always in the comments below, make sure you let me know what I missed. But with all that said, let's jump into some commanders with some truly nasty combos. First off, let's start off with Sharoom the Hegemon. Sharoom is a 5/5 flying legendary artifact creature Sphinx that costs 3 white, blue, black. She has, when she enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is an Esper artifact commander that can reanimate an artifact when it comes into play. Now that's an incredibly powerful effect, and also an incredibly broken one because, well, Sharoom is actually an artifact as well. Now, why exactly does that matter? Well, you see, if we could keep targeting Sharoom with her own ETB, we could keep getting her back from our graveyard to get another ETB, to get her back again, and so on and so forth. So while we can't have 2 Sharooms in our deck, because again this is Commander, what we can have are clones. So let's just take the original clone as an example. It's a 0/0 shapeshifter that can enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. So we can have it come into play as Sharoom, and it's going to get Sharoom's ETB. But before that ETB is put onto the stack, a state-based action occurs because, well, we've got 2 copies of Sharoom. Since Sharoom is legendary and we can't have 2 Sharooms in play, well, we've got to sacrifice one of them. So we sacrifice a Sharoom and then the ETB goes on the stack. Then we target the Sharoom that we sacrificed. That Sharoom comes back into play and then we have the exact same thing happen again. Because the legend roll, we lose one of them and then the ETB goes on the stack so we can target the one that we lost. Essentially, we're in a reanimation loop that we keep going through again and again and again as many times as we want. Now, this nasty combo is particularly nasty because you can utilize a lot of things to get this loop to occur. Essentially, any creature clone is going to work, so yeah, Phyrexian Metamorph, go for it. And even an artifact clone like Sculpting Steel can work as well. And if you've already got Phyrexian Metamorph or Sculpting Steel in your graveyard, well, Sharoom can just start the combo for you since these are artifacts that she can get back. Now, just looping a creature like this over and over again isn't going to win you the game. But there are plenty of different ways to finish your opponents off with things like Disciple the Vault, Altar the Brood, and Bitter Ordeal. Disciple the Vault says whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. So again, because Sharoom's an artifact, when she dies, you get to drain someone for 1. And when you can do that infinitely, your opponents are going to be out of life very quickly. Or you can use Sharoom entering the battlefield to mill all your opponents with something like Altar the Brood. It says whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. So their library is going to be gone in no time. And speaking of libraries being gone in no time, there's Bitter Ordeal. It's a sorcery that says search target player's library for a card and remove that card from the game, then that player shuffles their library and it's got Gravestorm. Now, unless you've seen Bitter Ordeal, you might not be familiar with Gravestorm at all because it's the only card that actually has it. Gravestorm means that when you play this spell, copied for each permanent put into a graveyard this turn, you may choose new targets for the copies. So again, you've got an infinite amount of your creature hitting the graveyard, so therefore your Gravestorm is infinite. Okay, rule slayers out there with all these things, again, technically you can't go infinite, you have to pick a number, so let's just say 8 trillion. Regardless, 8 trillion, alright? No matter what that number is, you can pick one high enough to take out everyone's libraries. So there are plenty of powerful ways to combo with Sharoom and a lot of powerful things that you can do with that combo. And next up, let's move on to a somewhat similar combo utilizing Bladewing the Risen. Bladewing the Risen is a 4/4 zombie dragon with flying that costs 3 black, black, red, red. It has when it enters the battlefield, you may return target dragon permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you can pump your dragons by paying Rakdos, though that isn't important for the combo. So, just as Sharoom can get you back an artifact, and she is an artifact, Bladewing can get you back a dragon, and it is a dragon. Now, although you're not in blue, so you don't have access to permanent clones, you do have access to temporary ones. So you can utilize cards like Twin Flame, Molten Echoes, and Cursed Mirror. Twin Flame says choose any number of target creatures you control. For each of them, put a token that's a copy of that creature onto the battlefield. Those tokens gain haste, exile them beginning of the next end step. Basically, you've got Bladewing in play, you cast this, making a copy of it. The state-based action occurs where you have to sacrifice one of them, so you sacrifice the original. Then the trigger of the new Bladewing goes on the stack, and then you can select the old Bladewing as the ETB target to bring back. So you keep the token in play and you bring your commander back into play. Again, thanks to the state-based action, you have to sacrifice one of them, so you sacrifice the original again. Its ETB then goes on the stack so you can select itself for its target. So again, like Sharoom, you can essentially just keep looping this again and again and again. Your commander comes into play, it dies, then its ETB brings it back. Over and over again. Molten Echoes works in a somewhat similar way. It says, when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, and whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. Again, as long as you've just got one token copy of Bladewing, that's all that matters. And even the new Cursed Mirror works with this as well. It says, as it enters the battlefield, you may have become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except that has haste. So, obviously, you're picking Bladewing. And in a similar way to Sharoom, you can win in various ways with things like Impact Tremors, Scourge of Valkis, and Zulaport Cutthroat. Impact Tremor says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Impact Tremor deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you can ping down all your opponents, and speaking of pinging down your opponents, Scourge of Valkis can help with that as well. It says whenever it or another dragon enters the battlefield under your control, deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons you control. And of course, there's the lovely Zulaport Cutthroat and any of the other Blood Artist type cards. It says whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So whether you're pinging your opponents down, you're milling them out, or you're draining them, it doesn't matter, you're going infinite and you win. But Bladewing actually has another nasty combo that I want to bring up. And that would be the combo with Bladewing, Hellkite Courser, and Goblin Bombardment. Hellkite Courser is a 6/5 flying dragon that says when it enters the battlefield, you may put a commander you own from the command zone onto the battlefield. It gains haste, return to the command zone at the beginning of the next end step. And then Goblin Bombardment is a free sacrifice element that says sacrifice a creature, Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to our creature or player. So essentially the combo works like this. Bladewing the Risen has an ETB that can get you back Hellkite Courser from your graveyard to the battlefield. And Hellkite Courser has an ETB that can get your commander out of the command zone and directly into play. So say Hellkite Courser is in your graveyard. You cast Bladewing and then it's coming into play and its ETB is going to be bringing Hellkite Courser back. You sacrifice Bladewing, pinging an opponent for 1 and putting it in your command zone. Then Hellkite Courser comes into play and its ETB is going to bring Bladewing back. Before that happens, you sacrifice Hellkite Courser, pinging an opponent for 1. So then it's back in your graveyard for Bladewing's ETB. Again, essentially you just keep looping this over and over again, pinging all your opponents down. So yeah, Bladewing can be a particularly nasty commander with some nasty combos. And speaking of nasty combos, let's talk about Ashura Soul the Wild. Ashura is a star elemental with power toughness equal to the number of lands you control. And then it has non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. So essentially by making your creatures lands, not only are you getting a lot of mana out of them, you're also getting a lot of absurd things that you can do with this. Now, let me just say before I jump into this commander, there are an absurd number of combos with it. But I'm just gonna highlight a few nasty ones. First off, let's talk about Nyxbloom Ancient and Pili-Pala. Nyxbloom Ancient says if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. And Pili-Pala has pay 2 and untap it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Now, Pili-Pala actually combos with a lot of different things, and this is just one example. Essentially with Nyxbloom Ancient in play though, all your creatures instead of tapping for 1, now tap for 3. So you tap your Pili-Pala for 3 mana, then you pay 2 and untap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Then you do it again, and again, and again. Congratulations, you've got infinite mana of whatever colors you want. And of course, there are plenty of ways to win from there. Next up, let's move on to another somewhat strange combo with Sakura Tribe Scout, Guildless Commons, and Stone Cedar Hierophant. Sakura Tribe Scout has tap, you may put a land card from your hand into play. Guildless Commons enters the battlefield tapped, and when it comes into play, you bounce a land you control back to its owner's hand, and it can tap for colorless. And then Stone Cedar Hierophant has whenever a land comes into play under your control, untap Stone Cedar Hierophant, and we can tap her to untap target land. So essentially, we can tap Sakura Tribe Scout to put Guildless Commons into play. Guildless Commons has an ETB trigger that when it comes into play, with the bounce land back to our hand, and we can use that to just bounce itself back to our hand. Now, just for the sake of this combo, let's say that Stone Cedar Hierophant is tapped before we do this. Because Guildless Commons came into play, we get that trigger on Stone Cedar Hierophant where she untaps. Then we can tap her to untap target land, which is Sakura Tribe Scout. Because again, thanks to Ashaya, our creatures are also lands, so Stone Cedar Hierophant can untap them. So then we can repeat this as many times as we want, getting us infinite landfall triggers. So if we've got any kind of landfall benefit in play, we get that as many times as we want. One final combo, though, is a very funny one in my opinion with Leyline of Abundance and Quirion Ranger. Like the other Leylines, if Leyline's in our opening hand, we can begin the game with it on the battlefield. It says whenever you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green. And by paying 6 green, we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. And then Quirion Ranger says return a force you control to its owner's hand, untap target creature, use this ability only once each turn. So essentially the combo works like this. We can utilize any creature to tap for mana, including our commander. And thanks to Leyline of Abundance, when that creature taps, it taps for green instead of just green. We can activate Quirion Ranger's ability by returning a forest back to our hand, and that forest that we choose is actually just going to be Quirion Ranger. Again, thanks to Ashaya, it's a forest, so we can use its own ability to bring itself back to our hand. So we untap that creature that we tap for mana, and then Quirion Ranger is in our hand. We tap that creature again for 2 more mana, and then we cast Quirion Ranger. Now, although Quirion Ranger's ability says use only once each turn, because it's technically a new permanent because it came back into play from our hand, we can do it again. So Quirion Ranger goes back to our hand, we untap that creature again, then we can tap it for mana. Essentially, we can keep doing this over and over again, generating infinite green mana. And then, thanks to Leyline of Abundance, we can make our creatures infinitely large. And of course, we can cast whatever else we want and win from there. So yeah, Ashaya can do some pretty crazy things by making our creatures into lands. Next up, we've got Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle. That's right, even a mono white commander can have some nasty combos. Teshar is a 2/2 flying bird cleric that says whenever you cast a Zork spell, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And just as a reminder, artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. So for example, we cast an artifact, we get a small creature back from our graveyard into play. There are quite a few ways to combo with this, and I'll just bring up some particularly nasty ones. The first combo involves something like Urza's Bauble and Salvager of Ruin. Urza's Bauble is an artifact for a 0 that has tap and sacrifice it, look at a card at random in target player's hand, you draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. And then Salvager of Ruin is a 2/1 construct that says sacrifice it, choose target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, return to your hand. So essentially the combo works like this. We have both of these in play and we tap and sacrifice the Bauble for a delayed card draw. With it in our graveyard, we sacrifice the Salvager of Ruin to bring it back to our hand. So now the Salvager of Ruin is in our graveyard, the Urza's Bauble is back in our hand, and then we cast the Bauble. Then our commander triggers, and then we return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. And of course, that creature would be Salvager of Ruin. So Salvager of Ruin comes back into play, and we're at the exact same spot where we started. So we repeat this again, and again, and again. Essentially as many times as we want to for the number of cards that we want to draw with the Bauble. So say that we did this 60 times, at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, we're getting 60 cards. But another combo around Teshar, and one that we can win with on the spot, is with cards like Welding Jar, Mirror Retriever, and Blasting Station. Welding Jar is an artifact for 0 that says sacrifice Welding Jar, regenerate target artifact. Mirror Retriever is a 1/1 mirror that says when it dies, return another target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. And Blasting Station has tap, sacrifice a creature, Blasting Station deals 1 damage to our creature or player, and when a creature comes into play, untap Blasting Station. So essentially the combo works like this. We sacrifice Welding Jar to regenerate another artifact, though which artifact we picked really doesn't matter. Then we tap Blasting Station to sacrifice Mirror Retriever, and we ping a player for 1. When Mirror Retriever dies, we get to return Welding Jar from our graveyard back to our hand. Then we cast the Welding Jar, and that's going to trigger our commander. So with Teshar's trigger, we get Mirror Retriever back from our graveyard directly into play. And because it entered the battlefield, Blasting Station is going to trigger. It untaps, so again we are at the exact same spot that we were when we started, except one player has 1 less life because we pinged them for 1. So essentially we can do this over and over again as many times as we want to ping down all the creatures in play that we want to, and all the players that we want to. Again, there are quite a few ways to combo with Teshar, and these are just a few of them. And speaking of quite a few ways to combo, let's talk about Sophie, Eric's daughter. Sophie is a 2/2 human scout for green-white. She has sacrifice Sophie, Eric's daughter. When target creature is put into your graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield. So this is a commander that can sacrifice itself to reanimate something that recently died. Yeah, there's a lot of incredibly powerful things that you can do with this. First off, let's talk about Altar of Dementia and Renegade Rallier. Altar of Dementia says sacrifice a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. And then Renegade Rallier has Revolt. When it enters the battlefield, if a permanent we control left the battlefield this turn, return target permanent card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this combo is very straightforward. Let's say that we've got these two things as well as our commander in play. We sacrifice Sophie, targeting the Renegade Rallier. So if it's put into our graveyard this turn, which it's going to be, it comes back onto the battlefield. Then we sacrifice Renegade Rallier with the Altar of Dementia to mill an opponent for 3. Renegade Rallier dies, then comes back thanks to Sophie, and then its ETB triggers. So we can return target permanent card with converted mana cost 2 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, which would be Sophie. So we can keep looping this, sacrificing, and bringing back over and over again. And while we're doing this, we're milling an opponent for 3 each time. So we can mill an opponent out very easily with this. And of course, there are plenty of different combinations with this that we can combo with, so let's go through a few more. So how about a card that we just talked about with Teshar with Blasting Station and then Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide says when it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we sacrifice Sophie, targeting Karmic Guide. Then we tap the Blasting Station to sacrifice Karmic Guide to ping an opponent for 1. Karmic Guide dies, then comes right back thanks to Sophie. Because Karmic Guide came back into play, we untap Blasting Station. And then with Karmic Guide's ETB, we return Sophie back from our graveyard to the battlefield. So yeah, we can do this as many times as we need to ping all of our opponents down. Now again, there are an absurd amount of Sophie combos, but let's just go through one more. So how about we talk about Ashnod's Altar and Sun Titan. Ashnod's Altar says sacrifice a creature, add colors to your mana pool. And Sun Titan has when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So in a very similar way to the previous combos, we start off by sacrificing Sophie, targeting the Sun Titan. Then with Ashnod's Altar, we sacrifice Sun Titan to add colorless. Thanks to Sophie, the Sun Titan comes right back into play, and then its ETB triggers. So we can return a card with converted mana cost 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, which again is going to be Sophie. So we're at the exact same spot we just were when we started this, but we've got 2 more mana. So we can do this as many times as we need to. We generate infinite colorless mana, and there are plenty of ways to win from there. So again, with Sophie, there are plenty of cards that combo, and plenty of cards that we can utilize in the combo, and it's just a very, very nasty combo commander. But next up, let's move on to yet another commander with some nasty combos with Kenroth, Return King. Kenroth is a 5/5 human noble with a lot of text, so here we go. Pay a red. All creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. Pay 1 and a green. Put a +1 counter on target creature. Pay 2 and a white. Target player gains 5 life. Pay 3 and a blue. Target player draws a card. And pay 4 and a black. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. Okay, I'm out of breath. Did you catch all that? Anyways, the one that I'm going to be focusing on right now is that last one. Essentially, Kenroth can reanimate a creature from anyone's graveyard coming back into play under their control. Now, obviously with this combo, we're going to be doing so with our graveyard. So let's talk about the cards Composite Golem and Zerda the Dawnwaker. Composite Golem is a 4/4 golem that has sacrifice it, add Wooburg to your mana pool. And Zerda has abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities, cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. So this combo is very straightforward and incredibly effective. Zerda makes every single one of Kenroth's abilities cost 2 less to activate. So instead of paying 4 and a black to reanimate something, we only have to pay 2 and a black. So from there, we sacrifice the Composite Golem to add Wooburg. With 3 of that mana, we then utilize Kenroth's ability to bring Composite Golem back. And then we do this over and over again as many times as we want, generating infinite mana of any color except for black. And then with all that mana, we can essentially do whatever we want with Kenroth's other abilities. We can draw our entire deck and find plenty of ways to win from there. If we really want to, we can gain infinite life as well, play all of our creatures, give them trample and haste, and make them infinitely large too. So yeah, that's very effective. Now there are other cards that can take Zerda's spot in this combo, but one other combo I want to bring up is utilizing Altar of Dementia and Peregrine Drake. Altar of Dementia we've already talked about, but Peregrine Drake is going to be a 2/3 Drake with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, we untap up to 5 lands. So this combo works in a somewhat similar way to the last one, where we basically just keep getting Peregrine Drake back over and over again. We play it, then we untap the lands that we utilize to cast it. We sacrifice it with Altar of Dementia to mill someone for 2. Then with those lands that we untap, we use them to bring Peregrine Drake back from our graveyard with Kenroth's ability. Peregrine Drake comes back into play, untapping our 5 lands, then we do the same thing over and over again. So all of our opponents are milled out. And if we've got any land that taps for more than one, we can generate infinite mana, though we really don't need to do that. So yeah, Kenny can have some really nasty combos. And speaking of nasty, I have to bring up the very nasty Carrick, son of Yawgmoth. He's a 2/2 horror minion for 4 Phyrexian Black, Phyrexian Black, Phyrexian Black. Now, Phyrexian Black can be paid with either black or 2 life. He's got lifelink, and for each black and a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana. And whenever you cast a black spell, put a +1 counter on him. So this is essentially a commander that turns all of your black pips into Phyrexian Black, meaning that instead of actually paying mana for something, you can just pay life, which is an incredibly broken thing. So now let's talk about Leshrac Sigil in Aetherflux Reservoir. Now, Leshrac Sigil is a really old enchantment, but the important part about it is that it costs black and it has paid black return it to its owner's hand. So because of that, thanks to our commander, we can essentially cast this card without paying any mana, and then we can bounce it back to our hand without paying any mana. Now this does cost life to do, but that's where something like Aetherflux Reservoir comes in handy. It says whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. And by paying 50 life, it's going to deal 50 damage to our creature or player. So essentially, if we have enough life, we can keep bringing the Sigil back to our hand and then recasting it and then gaining life with the Reservoir. Every time that we cast it, we gain more and more life with the Reservoir, and eventually we're going to be gaining more life than we lose. So we can just keep casting that over and over again, gaining more and more life, building our life total up to a point where we can just win the game. Once we've got over 150 life, we can just pay 50 life for each opponent and ping them down. But yet another way to combo this commander are with cards like Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Viscera Seer, and Chainer Dimension Master. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, better known as Gary, is a fantastic card in Commander, especially with a combo like this. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life for X of your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. And the Viscera Seer has sacrifice a creature, scry 1. Chainer Dimension Master says pay black and pay 3 life, put target creature card from a graveyard into play under your control. So the combo works like this. You sacrifice Gary with Viscera Seer to scry 1. Thanks to your commander, you can activate Chainer's ability by paying 9 life instead of paying any mana. So you bring Gary back into play under your control. So even with just your commander and these 3 creatures in play, you're going to be gaining a ton of life with Gary. Since Phyrexian mana counts toward devotion, you're going to have 8 devotion in total, which means each of your opponents is going to get drained by 8 and you're going to be gaining 24. At least I should say that's assuming that each of your opponents is alive. Regardless, you drain your opponents for a ton and gain a ton of life every single time that you do this. So yeah, you can finish your opponents off pretty quickly. Carrick is already a nasty commander and it's got some incredibly nasty combos. But next up though, let's move on to another commander and a really unique one with Drownu Lichlord. It's a 3/3 zombie wizard that says if damage be dealt to it, sacrifice that many permanents instead. So yeah, that's not good. Or at least I should say that's not good most of the time. Regardless, Drownu also has tap, target insert sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So Drownu can help you recast things from your graveyard. And this particularly nasty combo works with Isochron Scepter, Pull from Eternity, and any kind of an extra turn spell that exiles like Temporal Trespass. Isochron Scepter has when it enters the battlefield, you may exile an instant sorcery card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand. And then by paying 2 and tapping it, you may copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So the card that we're going to imprint onto this is Pull from Eternity. It says put target face-up card that's removed from the game into its owner's graveyard. And like I mentioned before, the last piece is an extra turn spell that exiles itself like Temporal Trespass. So the combo works like this. We cast Temporal Trespass, so we're going to be getting an extra turn after this one, and it exiles. Then we pay 2 and tap the Scepter to bring Temporal Trespass back into our graveyard from exile. On our next turn with Temporal Trespass in our graveyard, we tap our commander to give it flashback. So we flash it back and it exiles again. And then we utilize the Scepter to cast Pull from Eternity again to get it back into our graveyard. So then we get another turn, and then we do this all over again, and another turn, and another turn, and another turn, and you see where this is going. We get infinite turns, and there's a lot of ways to win from there. And again, keep in mind that this combo works with basically any extra turn spell that exiles itself. So some other ones to consider are Part the Water Veil, Karn's Temporal Sundering, and Alrund's Epiphany. Part the Water Veil can help us win by making our lands into creatures. Karn's Temporal Sundering can bounce our opponent's non-land permanents back to their hands. And Alrund's Epiphany can make us a ton of birds. But yeah, even outside of these extra turn spells, of course, there are plenty of other things in our deck that can help us win when we've got infinite turns. Now, the final commander with a nasty combo that I want to bring up is somewhat of a strange one with Tanawa. Tanawa is a 7/7 Serpent with Trample and Phasing, and at the beginning of your upkeep, all lands you control phase out. Now, phasing is a really old mechanic, so let's just go over it really quick. Basically, both Tanawa and your lands are going to phase in or out before you untap during each of your untap steps. While it's phased out, it's treated as though it doesn't exist. So they essentially go away and then come back, though they're not triggering any ETBs because they're not like exiling and coming back, they're just kind of gone. Yeah, phasing is weird. Regardless, normally this would be a huge downside. I mean, you lose your lands basically every other turn. But you can turn that into a giant upside with a card like Sunder. Sunder is an instant for 3 blue that says return all lands to their owner's hands. So when our lands are gonna phase out, we tap them for mana. Then our lands phase out, and then we utilize that mana to cast Sunder. So our lands won't get bounced back to our hand because they're phased out, but our opponent's lands definitely will. So yeah, this combo is particularly nasty, and it's so nasty that you should probably be asking your playgroup before you play with this one. Technically, it's not mass land destruction, but it basically is. Regardless, now this episode is coming to a close, and it's my turn to hear from you. So, in the comments below, let me know which of these combos in Commanders was your favorite. And also, let me know what nasty combos I missed either with these Commanders or with other ones. There are plenty of fantastic combos out there and fantastically nasty Commanders out there, so I'm sure I missed a few. Regardless, as always, thanks again and have a good one.